Hi everyone and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, or welcome if you're new to my channel. Either way, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. It would help me out greatly. So we're going to finish up February here as we're at the last day of the month, as hard as it is to believe. Of course, taking a look at a 1981 horror movie is part of my overall series here, 1980s series. And this is a movie that I don't have the physical media for. Will I be getting it? Maybe at some point. We'll see. But that movie I streamed on Amazon Prime, or I rented it, I should say, and that movie is Absurd, the Joe D'Amato film. So there's some question about whether Absurd is a follow-up sequel to Anthropophagus, which of course I reviewed last year as part of the series for 1980. But it really, as it says, it's a sequel in spirit only. It's a spiritual sequel to Anthropophagus. The connections between the films are George Eastman and Joe D'Amato's involvement, the presence of a murderer played by George Eastman in an effectively the same role as the one he played in the first film, The Disemboweled Man. Of course, the only difference is I would say the first film, Anthropophagus, is more of a cannibal film. This is clearly a rip-off. I don't want to say it's a rip-off of an American slasher film. And one specifically, which is Halloween. This has got Halloween written all over it, and done as an Italian slasher movie. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into Absurd, which in Italian is known as Rasu Sangu, literally the literal translation Blood Red, also known as Anthropophagus 2, Zombie 6, Monster Hunter, Horrible, and the Grim Reaper 2. So lots of different names depending on where you are in the world for this movie. But it's a 1981 English language Italian slasher film, directed, lensed, and co-produced by Joe D'Amato and starring George Eastman, who also wrote the story and the screenplay. So, as I said, it's a spiritual sequel to Anthropophagus, but not a literal sequel. Very different stories, despite the involvement of the director and the main actor. But basically, Mikos Tanopoulos is a man who was experimented on in a church-sanctioned scientific experiment that gave him healing powers, but inadvertently drove him insane as well. The Vatican priest who helped create him pursues the homicidal Mikos to a small American town, attempting to kill him by impaling him on a set of railings that disembowel him. Still, he revives later at the local hospital. After brutally murdering a nurse, the madman escapes and goes on a killing spree. The priest informs the hospital and the authorities that the only way to kill Mikos is to destroy the cerebral mass. So the head, in other words. While attacking a motorcyclist after escaping from the hospital, Mikos is struck by a hit-and-run driver. The car's driver, Mr. Bennett, and his wife are going to a friend's house for a Super Bowl viewing party, leaving their two children at home with the babysitter. Their daughter, Katya, is confined to a bed because of a problem with her spine, while her younger brother believes the boogeyman is coming to get him. So that sounds familiar, doesn't it? As far as the cast goes, we have George Eastman as Mikos Tanopoulos, Annie Bell as Emily, Charles Boromel as Sergeant Ben Engelman, Edmund Purdom as the priest, Katya Berger as Katya Bennett. She got to keep her first name, I guess. Casimir Berger as Willie Bennett, Hanja Kokansky as Carol Bennett, the mother, and Ian Danby as Ian Bennett, the father. So yeah, that's to set up the premise and the cast for the 1981 Italian slasher movie, Absurd. Like I said, this is a Halloween ripoff. I mean, Anthropophagus was more of a cannibal film, a cannibal horror film, much more done for the Italian audience. This is a slasher film, much more done for the American audience. Not just with the blatant parallels to Halloween, but also the fact that they really push. There's a Super Bowl football game being played, the actual Super Bowl in 1981 or 1980, I should say, between the Steelers and the Rams. So this was totally made for American audiences, and obviously it's in an English language as well. But It's not a bad effort. It's not a bad film at all. It's got issues. I have issues with it. But I also like some things about it. So let's go ahead and get into it, starting with the pros about Absurd. The kills are probably the best part of this movie, as you can imagine. They're pretty well paced and spaced out throughout the movie. And I think they're also very creative, unique, and brutal. They're not just the stab, stab, stab. But you got a character that gets their head shoved in an oven when the oven is obviously on. That doesn't end well for that character. You got a character laying down being pushed towards a power drill. And then you have another character earlier in the hospital with a handheld drill, like a hospital instrument drill that gets... it kind of reminded me a little bit of Zombie, where you've got the sharp object going towards the eye. They have a drill that they kind of hold out for a while before they finally go all the way through the head. And I'm not going to say it's as well done in terms of like gore or practical effects, but it's still pretty well done. We see a lot of blood coming out, and then we see the drill come through the other side. So yeah, the kills, man, both in terms of the uniqueness of them, what's the word I'm searching for? The uniqueness and the variety. There we go. Variety of kills. They're not just the same. I like that. And like I said, they're pretty well spaced out throughout the movie. We don't get them all in the first 20 minutes, or we don't get them all in the last 20 minutes. We get some in each act of the movie, if I remember right. So I think the kills are fairly bloody and effective. Not overly gory, like Anthropophagus, where you've got the cannibal eating. More blood, I would say, but still effective. The gore effects are pretty well done, considering this was a low-budget movie, especially the character that gets their face or head shoved into the oven and burned. I thought the practical makeup and gore effects on that was really effective. Really creepy, actually. Realistic. But like I said, the drill kills are pretty good. Again, not overly gory as far as like, seeing human entrails or organs or anything like that. But in terms of blood, and there's a lot of blood in this movie. So yeah, for the low budget nature, pretty good gore and makeup effects here that I really enjoyed. I think the look and the performance of George Eastman as Mikos the killer is really good. Obviously the look, he's a very big and intimidating kind of guy that you definitely wouldn't want to meet, especially when he's insane on a dark night. It's intimidating. He has the eye thing going as well, where he's able to really creep people out with his eyes, which works, before he gets them stabbed out towards the end of the movie. But yeah, I thought George Eastman was an effective killer. The movie does have a good small town setting, which of course I like. If you've seen my other reviews, I like the small town setting and atmosphere, and I think the movie has pretty good atmosphere as a slasher movie. There's some buildup of tension and suspense, not as good as it could have been. We'll get more into that with my cons, but it does have good atmosphere. The music, I think, adds something too. The music is very strange. It's definitely an Italian kind of score, while still having some of the same beats of Halloween, not being a direct ripoff, but definitely trying to get that Halloween theme in there, but an Italian version. But it's very... I don't know how to describe the score of the music, but it's very, like, leery and very... I don't know. You have to watch the movie, but it's different. It's unique, and I think it works for this kind of movie, because this movie is unique. And then I also think the ending, the very end of the movie, having to do with our main final girl or protagonist, however you want to say it. There's a shot where everybody's standing there, and she's completely covered in blood, of course, and she says to her younger brother, "You don't have to worry now, everything's going to be okay," and she lifts up the severed head of a certain killer. I thought that was a very effective way to end the movie. Very, very powerful, very badass, with all the blood and then the characters just watching kind of in disbelief. I thought that was a good way to wrap up the movie. As I said, the score was good, the directing was good. So yeah, those are my pros for Absurd. As far as cons go, they don't really do much with or follow up on how or why Mikos is able to heal. Not really a backstory or a flashback that I think we could have used at the beginning of the movie on how this happens. Would have been nice to have that. I think it would have added a little bit more to the overall layers of the movie. All we know is from my notes or from Wikipedia, or not Wikipedia, from IBDM, IDBM, IBD. You know what I'm talking about. That he was experimented on in a church-sanctioned scientific experiment that gave him healing powers and caused him to go nuts. But I think it would have been helpful for this movie to actually see that, even if it was a short flashback or a little bit more explanation. But yeah, I don't know. I could have used more there. And then on top of that, well, they establish that Mikos can heal instantly at the beginning of the movie. They kind of go away from that and forget about it by the third act of the movie specifically, as he can no longer heal quickly. This is represented by him getting his eyes gouged out by a protractor, I believe it is, and he's stabbed and blinded by it. That I had a little bit of a trouble with. It's like, why did you set that up at the beginning, even though you really didn't set it up that well? But now all of a sudden we're just going to pretend it never happened. Also, the fact that Katya, no, how the hell do you pronounce her name? Oh, I think I spelled it wrong in one of these. Katya. The fact that the final girl is strapped into the bed for most of the movie with a spinal cord injury, but then is able to get up and wander around. And she does stumble a little bit, but the way they set that up, you would have thought that there was no way she could get around. And she gets around pretty well. So why even set that up? I mean, it was kind of a cool, kind of an interesting setup. But then they don't go anywhere with it, and they kind of ruin it by having her stumble around like a typical final girl in a slasher movie. I have to say I was more entertained by the first act of the movie and how it started than I was with the second and third acts. As things kind of slowed down a bit too much with some extra padding, especially in the second act, but even a little bit in the third act. I felt like the movie might have blown its load a little too early. Not to say, as I said, I really like the ending shot of the movie, and there are some good things, but I don't feel like they build up the tension as much as they could have for reasons that I mentioned. With Eastman's character losing the ability to heal, and the final girl, Katya's ability to all of a sudden be able to get around well, despite the fact that they wanted us to believe that she's confined to being strapped into a bed. So, I don't know, story-wise, it's a slasher movie. It all doesn't need to work or make sense. Certainly a lot of American slashers don't. You just kind of have to go with it. But those are some things that bothered me about the movie. I don't think the acting is overly great in the movie. Again, not a killer, because most slasher movies in America are not great acting either, with few exceptions. Obviously Halloween. But yeah, with that being said, I think the movie's fine. I mean, I could see owning it sometime. I'm not going to rush out to get it or to buy it for more than, I'm not going to pay too much for it, especially when I can stream it. But I think it's good. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I think that it's solid. Not great, not terrible, but absurd is solid. I think it's a fairly decent effort from Joe D'Amato and George Eastman to try to cash in on the American slasher market during that time. Clearly taking like 80% of it from Halloween, while still having its Italian vibes and Giallo vibes going on as well, to make it a little bit more unique. So, 7 out of 10 for Absurd from 1981. Go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of this movie. If you've seen it before, does it work for you? Does it not? Comment down below. Please like this video, hit the little notification bell, and subscribe to my channel as I mentioned earlier, so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series, as well as any of the other great horror content that I have coming out for you guys, including for the month of March here, which I'll have an intro video here in a day or so. So, with all that being said, thank you for watching. Hope you're doing well. But as always, stay scared. Bye.